Right, switching gears, last time from the Silmarillion, the lesson being, I think I said all conflict is ultimately spiritual, I meant to say theological. Anyway, this time around, the idea is repetition is the key to learning. That was the takeaway. And the stories I have in mind, there's 4 of them, but they're short form. The Ant and the Grasshopper, The 3 Little Pigs, and The Boy Who Cried Wolf, followed up by something less familiar, something I actually saw on YouTube, Dinner for Few. So you very likely heard of the first 3, maybe not so much the last one, but I'm just gonna launch into them regardless. So, the Fable of the Ant and the Grasshopper from Aesop. Thousands of years ago, in Greece, a guy thought, let's teach some morals from, I don't know, a children's level of understanding. Like, if even a child can understand the various virtues of Aristotle, then maybe the generations will grow up wiser. So, Ant and the Grasshopper, one that has absolutely stuck with me, is, as one would guess, about an ant and a grasshopper who, during the summertime, have taken up very different things. Whereas the grasshopper spends the whole summer just kind of goofing off, playing on his tiny little grasshopper-sized fiddle, the ant is busy harvesting while there is time, while there's wheat in the field and whatnot. And every now and then the grasshopper will say, "Hey ant, come away from your work and have fun with me, you know, be merry." And the ant every time refuses him, saying, "Look, I gotta make hay while the sun shines, as it were. I've got a family to think about, and winter will be coming on eventually." And so the ant's a workaholic, but later on, sure enough, winter comes, and the grasshopper finds that there is no more grain to eat. He's starving, and so he goes to the ant's door. I know they don't really have a door, and he knocks on the non-existent door and says, "Hey ant, I don't have any food out here, and I'm really hungry. Could I come in and have some of your grain?" And the ant says, "Look, I'm sorry, I told you winter was coming, and I've got a very large family to think about and to feed." And, you know, ants, obviously, they number in the millions, obviously, all the food they collect, it will be needed. So, in various iterations of the story, sometimes the ant's like, "Too bad, buddy, suck it," and then in other iterations the ant is kind-hearted and feels sorry, but regardless, the ant does not give the grasshopper any food because, you know, he worked for it and he needs it, and so the grasshopper ends up starving. And, you know, obviously the moral of that story is, you know, again, make hay while the sun shines. Make sure that you take advantage of a situation that otherwise you will not get again. Hard times will come and you need to be ready for them. Short and sweet. Honestly, I'm kind of doing a disservice to Aesop by making the stories longer than they are. The next one is 3 Little Pigs. I forget if that's a Brothers Grimm story or not, but I think it is. Again, I think we've all heard this one, but regardless, there are 3 pigs who, just like with the last story, are capable of speech and human mannerisms. And their mother sends them out into the world when they're of age to be independent, build their own houses. But she warns them, you know, beware, there's a big bad wolf out there. And so the first 2 kind of scoff and say, "Well, who's afraid of the big bad wolf? Not I." And the third one, maybe he scoffs, maybe he doesn't, but he takes it seriously at least. And so when they're building their houses, the first pig, he just wants to be done with the work already. And so he builds a house out of straw. Takes him like a couple of hours. The second little pig builds his out of sticks, which, yeah, it's better than straw, but it's still going to get knocked down by a small gust of wind. The third little pig, he takes his friggin' time. He eventually builds his house out of bricks and mortar, you know, and I watched the little Merry Melodies cartoons, or there was this other one as well, I forget which, but anyway, there's been many iterations of the 3 Little Pigs, Richard Scarry, etc. Anyway, so the first 2 get done real quick, and they spend that time very much as the grasshopper did, actually, dancing and singing and having a good time and goofing off. And they kind of mock the third little pig, saying, "Hey, look at him, he's still at work and stuff, and we're already done. We already have our houses built." And the third pig's like, "Look, I'll be safe, and you'll be sorry when the wolf comes to your door, because your houses are not going to be enough to keep him out." And exactly as the story is set up, a big bad wolf does indeed come along. And obviously, children's stories, a big bad wolf is just an allegory for the evils in the world. Like, they take many perverse forms, and whereas some are conscious, like evil people, others are just forces of nature, like tornadoes and hurricanes and floods and stuff. Regardless, in the form of a big bad wolf, we see the first little pig run away into his house at the first sight, and when the big bad wolf comes to his door, demands to be let in and is denied, he'll huff, and he'll puff, and he'll blow his house down, and sure enough, the wolf has just super iron lungs and just blasts the house down in one basically sneeze. So, the first little pig, depending on the story, either gets eaten or runs and makes it safely to the second little pig's house. But either way, the wolf does eventually get to that house as well, the House of Sticks. Same thing happens. He knocks, demands the pig let him in to be eaten, just... Evil is somewhat lazy. Evil demands surrender. And, you could surrender to evil and just propagate more evil. All that it takes for evil to succeed is that good men do nothing. Or you can resist evil. So I kind of like how the wolf demands to be let in at the door. Like, just give yourself up to be eaten. And the pigs, to their credit, again say, no, not doing it. Not by the hair of my chinny chin chin. And so once again, the wolf uses his supernatural powers to just blow the house down. Have you ever tried blowing on a stick? I mean an upright stick, obviously. Even if you prop it into the ground just a little bit, it's hard to blow a stick down, let alone a house made of it. But, he succeeds. Down goes the house. And so, the two pigs run to their third pig brother's house of bricks, which at that point has just recently been finished. And the third pig lets him in. Or the third pig just, his two brothers get eaten and he's just left to himself until the wolf inevitably arrives at his door. So the wolf asks once again, let me in, and he says no, and the wolf blows and blows and blows, but obviously, a house made of bricks, no amount of blowing is going to let him in. And it kind of reminds me of the biblical verse where Jesus says that anybody who takes my lessons to heart is like a wise man who built his house on a solid foundation. I know it's not quite the same thing, but, solid house of bricks. The things that come, the wind, the rains, the storms, the weather, whatever it is that we build houses to fortify against, especially when we need a safe place to sleep, all that is represented by the wolf blows and blows and cannot get in. The house stands firm. So, the wolf, again, being a replacement, a stand-in for evil, he's not deterred. He decides he's going to go down the chimney and get the pig that way. Like, even when you have made all of the usual preparations against the problems of the world, you still gotta be on your toes, and you still gotta be a thinker. And so the third little pig, whenever the wolf attempts to come down the chimney, he's prepared a pot of boiling water, which is saying something. You can't just boil water in a minute. Like, it's too late if you only start the boiling by the time the wolf is halfway up the house. So, he apparently prepared boiling water in advance. Maybe he was cooking something in the oven or on the fire and it just happened to work out, but... Anyway, when the wolf comes down the chimney, depending again on the story, he either screams "Yow!" and flies out and runs away, or if you believe the not for kids story, the wolf just immediately dies in the pot because, boiling water, it'll kill you immediately. Anyway, the moral of that story obviously is, once again, hard work pays off. Yeah, hard work is hard. We don't like it, but it is good. It is a virtue. So, it's largely crossing over with the story of the ant and the grasshopper, and that's why I found it memorable. Third one, once again, there's a wolf in it, the boy who cried wolf. Not so much hard work this time, but more of a story about lying and the morals that go with it. There's a boy who's in charge of a flock of sheep, back in the day when we actually had shepherds other than the Bedouins of Saudi Arabia. And he gets lonely because being a shepherd is lonely work. All day you just spend out in a field with your animals that bleat and can't actually talk to you. And so, wanting attention, the boy eventually decides, alright, I'm just gonna yell, "Wolf, wolf!" And there's a town nearby, so people will come running. Because otherwise, they got stuff to do. They can't be with the boy in the herd all day because they're busy, like, grinding at the mill or, being soldiers in the army or doing everything else that a civilization needs to do. But anyway, he cries, "Wolf, wolf," the people come running from the town, and when they see that there's no wolf, the boy either says, "I made it up, sorry," or he says, "Aha, I chased the wolf off, but thanks for coming." So either way, the people are like, alright, and they go back to their business. Same thing happens again. Eventually, the boy gets lonely enough that he cries, "Wolf, wolf," and once again, the people come, and there is no wolf. And so, depending on whether it's the third time or however many other iterations, inevitably, eventually, there comes a time where a wolf really does come. And the boy, more fearful than ever, shouts, "Wolf, wolf!" But the townspeople, depending on the story, are either like, he can handle it, he's always handled it in the past, or the more popular version, there was never any wolf, and so they're like, we're not coming to him. He's just making it up again. He's just lying for attention. And so, either the wolf eats the flock and the boy, or the people end up thinking, alright, well, maybe there really is a wolf, and they come and they chase it off, and the boy's like, "Oh, thank you, I've learned my lesson." He has his hand over his heart. But, again, the moral of the story is, a liar will not be believed even when he tells the truth. And it kind of reminds me of an episode from Deep Space Nine, back in the day when Star Trek was still good. There is a space station, and there's these various aliens that interact with each other on that show, and one of them is from a race called the Cardassians, who are particularly devious. And this one living on this station is called Garrick. And because he is a spy for the Cardassians, he tends to have to lie about what he's really doing there. He pretends to just be running a clothes shop and that's it, and when in fact he's like Black Ops. But anyway, during one of his operations, he ends up having to blow up his own clothes shop, and then people get all suspicious of him, like, "Are you really a victim here? Like, you're saying that somebody attacked you for no reason, but you won't get into the details on it or anything. What are you really up to?" And he's like, "Why does nobody believe me on this?" And so one of his friends tells him the story of the boy who cried wolf. And once he gets to the whole moral of a liar will not be believed even when he tells the truth, Garrick thinks for a moment and he's like, "I think there's a different moral to this." And his friend's like, "Well, what else could it possibly be?" Never tell the same lie twice. It kind of makes you think, like, again, the end lesson of all three of these things is repetition is the key to learning. The fact that these stories are hundreds, sometimes thousands of years old, it speaks to how they touch the human heart and how the human experience has endured for thousands of years. Like, people are the same even today as they were thousands of years ago. We still had people who were repeat liars and then had to be told, "Look, you're not going to be believed even when you tell the truth." Or we'll have lazy people who they don't prepare against the evils of the world, or at least the hardships, and then they suffer the consequences later. It's like you gotta be looking ahead. You gotta think ahead. You can't just forever live in the moment. But, the stories get told to grandchildren, told to grandchildren, told to children, told to grandchildren, down and down and down the generations, and they hold their shape, the best stories do. Which brings us to Dinner for Few, which I would regard as a modern-day fairy tale. Now, this is not a story, rather, it was a video on YouTube. I can't remember its runtime, I think it was around 10 minutes or something. But once again, it's a story that contains pigs, but you know what, let me just talk you through it because it's all visual, there's no actual telling. So let me set the scene for you. There's this hotel just all by itself in the middle of a storm, and there's like storm waters rising around it, but it's on a high cliff, so the storm waters are not yet close to this hotel. And we zoom into a room where there's a table. It's a living room, or dining room, and around this table are seated a bunch of pigs, There's like, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 of them. It's been a while since I watched it, but it left an impression. And they're all eating a very fancy feast. It's plentiful spread on the table. There's corn, there's turkey, there's this beef loaf, there's vegetables and fruits, and it's very colorful, all the nice things you'd expect from a Thanksgiving spread or whatever. And around them on the floor are a bunch of cats. For anybody who's never been in this situation, just let me tell you a little story, side story. I went to Israel a couple of years ago, and apparently there was this place called the Taj Mahal where we ate at. Not that Taj Mahal, this is just a restaurant that was a tent, a giant tent, but still just an outside tent. And we didn't eat at tables, but rather we sat on like lowered ground tables, and all this is besides the point. The point is, cats, just feral cats, were able to slip through the flaps in the tent, and when the servers would bring us food and stuff, these cats were bold, and they'd come right up to us, because, you know, people like cats, and often people will feed the cats from the tables, or sometimes the cats will be crafty and they'll just like snatch some food and run. But you know, this is a thing in some parts of the world. People will be eating around a table where there's cats on the floor, and sometimes they'll give scraps to cats. Or dogs. You know. Anyway, so there's a whole bunch of cats, and these pigs who are eating around this table will sometimes feed scraps to the cats. Now, there's a waiter who is continuing to bring them food and provide food, and this is a very fancy room. There's a bunch of stuff in it. There's wardrobes, there's chests, drawers, there's all these things inside, like not even just clothes either. There's like little model airplanes and trains and just paintings on the wall. It's very, I don't know, high class, I want to say. However, as time goes on and these pigs around the table are continuing to eat and eat and eat, the waiter brings these things from the room and puts them in this machine. It's like a grinder of sorts. What do I want to... like a wood chipper, supposedly. He puts this stuff in one end, and out the other end comes a new sort of food to bring to the table. So the room is steadily becoming barer, where there used to be chests and drawers and little model airplanes and paintings and whatnot. Now it's becoming barer walls and less stuff in the room. Now, the pigs who are consuming all these foods and whatnot, let me talk for a minute about them. They're wearing wigs and hats and whatnot. One is wearing like that curled wig of a judge. One is wearing a hat of the chief of police. One is wearing like a king's crown. One of them is wearing like a pope hat, or a cardinal at least, like the head of a religious authority. So all these guys are like the chief high-class people of a society. And meanwhile, the cats on the ground, they're not pigs, but they are still benefiting from the same goods, if only a little bit. But as they continue eating, and there continues to be less stuff to be put through the food grinder, the pigs start to throw less scraps on the floor. Now and then, a scrap will roll under the table, and so cats will lunge under the table to get them, but they never come back out of the table. So it's weird. And we get to see at one point a cat lunging under the table to grab a scrap. And what does he see? Under the table is a chain that is wrapped around the legs of all the pigs that are eating at the table. So they're all bound together somehow, like the magistrate pig, the jailer pig, the king pig, the pope pig, the chief of police pig. All of these pigs, for some reason, they're all caught together, so they can't really get up from the table even if they wanted to. Not that they wanted to, they're just benefiting from the feast. But as there becomes less and less food... Well, hang on a second, before I get to that. The cat who goes under the table suddenly sees the chain come to life, like there's an end of the chain that looks like a snake's mouth, and quick as lightning, it snatches up the cat, and that's the last we see of the cat. So, more on that in a little bit. But for now, less and less food comes onto this once richly established table until there are only scraps left. And so the pigs at the table, they all look at each other and then they glare at each other and then they start fighting over the scraps. Meanwhile, the cats on the ground, who are not getting any scraps anymore, they start jumping up on the table. And at first the pigs are able to just knock them down off the table because they're much bigger than the cats are. But eventually there comes a point where so many cats are jumping up on the table and being knocked away that all of a sudden they transform. They all come together at once into a tiger. And a tiger is not getting knocked off the table. And so all the pigs are suddenly at once caught off guard by this tiger, and they're freaking terrified. But the chains that keep them bound by the legs to each other under the table forbid them from getting away. They cannot get away from this tiger. And so the tiger just mauls them, and it's a bloodbath. Now all this is like cartoony blood, by the way, but it's still... the guy who made it, I don't know his name, but he does a pretty good job of digital blood. So the waiter, the butler, meanwhile, is kind of cowering in the corner, and the tiger doesn't see him. He's too busy mauling all these pigs that clearly represent the elites of our society. And it's not until all the pigs are dead, and the tiger's had his fill of the pigs, or her fill of the pigs, that she lies down and goes to sleep. So she's gotten pretty big, pretty fat, and the butler, seeing that the tiger has fallen asleep after killing the high-class elites, the Pope Pig and the King Pig and the Chief of Police Pig and the Judge Pig, they're all just dead and their remains are just dripping. The butler thinks, okay, now's my chance. So he gets a knife. He's a butler, and he's prepared food, so he happens to still have a knife, and he's able to kill this thing in its sleep. So, he stabs it, it just dies immediately. However, it wasn't merely fat. Turns out this tiger was pregnant, a female tiger. And so the butler's like, oh, what have I done? And so and the cubs are still alive. And so, he cuts the tiger open, he takes the cubs out, and he brings the new tiger kittens to a new room in the hotel. And just like the other room before it was stripped bare, this room is once again, paintings on the wall, wardrobes, clothes, models of planes and trains and stuff. All these things are once again in this new room. And so he sets the cubs down, and the scene switches to a shadow on the wall. So you see the shadows of these cubs kind of turning into cat forms, mostly. But from them, a couple of them morph and become pigs. And so the last shot we get before it starts to fade away is to a new group of pigs all sitting down at the table together. Once again, Judge Pig, King Pig, Chief of Police Pig, Pope Pig, etc. They sit down at the table, having come initially from the cats. And they all have their feast once again. The cycle repeats. Once again, the little cats are left on the floor, and the pigs eat at the table. And, the butler continues to strip things from the room to feed them and keep the feast ongoing. It is a dinner for few. So as the story kind of fades out from there, it pans back out of the room, back from the hotel, and you can see that the rain is continuing to pour outside and the floodwaters are getting just a little bit higher. So obviously, while it is open to interpretation, there are certain takeaways you can get from this story. Some things are fairly obvious. Obviously, the pigs are the elites of society, and the chain under the table that binds them together, it speaks to the idea that the elites cannot get where they are without cooperation. We, the little people, we can do enough to sustain ourselves as needed. The stuff all around us, that stuff is, what is it? All the goods of society, all the assets, all the things that we need in order to live and whatnot. This earth is rich in stuff, like trees, resources, stuff from the ground, animals, so on and so forth. We use it and we get along, we sustain ourselves. So, like, just as the cats are surviving on the scraps, we don't need all that much to get by and survive. But the elites, the pigs at the table, though they have enough, they are ever desirous of more. Like, no matter how much they feast at the table, they continue to want more and more and more. And so the butler, who takes the stuff from the room and grinds it down into the food to feed the elites, he's just kind of doing their bidding. He is making the provision possible. So, for instance, somebody who owns like this huge company, or at least is involved in this huge scheme and maybe money laundering or whatnot, maybe the food on the table is like them being able to have political power in some country overseas or something, or when you have all the money you could ever want, and, you know, it'll buy you all the booze and all the creature comforts and all the sex and whatnot that you could ever desire, what's left at that point? What do you do with this surplus of money? And obviously power. One can never have enough power in the mind of the elites. And if it means taking the assets of society and just devoting it to yourself, like, there are more cats, way more cats than pigs at the table, but as long as you keep the little people sustained with the little scraps that they need to get by, then they'll be satisfied in infighting with themselves, fighting for the scraps and taking the scraps, and they won't be desirous of any more. So you could continue and continue for so long until eventually the assets of society run out. Eventually the room gets stripped bare, and there is nothing left to put into the grinder so as to make things for you to benefit off. The pigs eventually have no more food. And the earlier point about the chains that I forgot about, and now I remembered again, was you cannot get into that sort of powerful position unless you're willing to play nice and work together with others. That's what I think the chain represents. It is the conspiracy amongst the elite, or at least the willingness to work together, regardless of whether you like the others or not, in order to maintain your power. So, you know, if a judge happens to be corrupt, but the judge knows the chief of police, then the corrupt chief of police can make it in such a way that they can find grounds to arrest whoever is about to expose the judge's corruption, and vice versa. Like, if this cardinal, this pope pig or whatever, is, like, guilty of, I don't know, going to Epstein's Island or something, for instance, well then, it can be easily covered up by the others. But then, you know, they've got dirt on you, you best have dirt on them. And so all these elites, they all have this dirt on each other, and so they are bound together by this chain that they have forged basically of themselves. They have to stick together. Even to the point that they cannot escape whenever eventually the low class rises up against them. And it always happens. Like, the cycle is, eventually there will be a revolution if the elites become too distant from the people, if they forget where they came from, if they take so much and leave so little for the rest of the populace. This is what happens, the end result. And it's something that appeals to pretty much the left and right of the political divide. Like, the left is obviously all about that, what do you call it? Proletariat versus bourgeoisie. I'm butchering the pronouncement, but it's like that Marxism thing. It's like, there's those rich people and then there's the poor, and so we need to have communism where we're all equal and nobody's better than anybody else. And so that appeals to the left side of the spectrum. But it also appeals to the right in the idea that it's inarguable that, at least right now in this modern age, there are absolutely rich elites who look down their noses at, you know, both the middle and the poor class, and it's like, you know, those plebeians who don't know anything. We're just going to... what do I want to do? we're just going to not necessarily flaunt their conspiracies out in the open, but eventually, after getting away with stuff for so many years, they get bold and they get arrogant, and they don't even try to hide it. I'm reminded of the Joe Biden presidency. We all knew that he was dementia-riddled, and nevertheless, all the talking heads on television just went along with it as though nothing was wrong. So, it's just like, when we know that things need to change and things need to be better, but all those with power refuse to make it better, why, if they don't despise us in some way? So, of course the pigs at the table, while they'll throw enough at the cats on the ground to keep them satisfied and infighting amongst themselves, they're never going to give any more than they have to. It's just enough to sustain them, to keep their empires going until the resources run out. Anyway, at this point I think I'm rambling, but I haven't already said it. By all means, check out Dinner for Few. It's a little graphic, but it is absolutely a modern-day allegory that I think, had it been a fairy tale hundreds of years ago, it would have been remembered today. I am certain of it. I'm looking at a little paper of lessons on here, and I kind of took a lesson from Dinner for Few as well. Like, after a respite, evil grows again. That's kind of going back to Tolkien. That's a quote from him. Like, every time that evil is overthrown, every time there is a revolution, sometimes the revolution isn't necessarily even justified, but after a respite, evil takes a new shape and grows again. So, while in Dinner for Few, the new hubs, which became mostly cats but a few pigs, yeah, the pigs were different pigs, but they still took on the exact same hats and whatnot at the table. So, next time, when the evil is in the form of a serpent and it gets destroyed, it comes back as some sort of warping chameleon shadow, or maybe if it gets destroyed it becomes a dragon, or maybe if that gets destroyed, maybe it becomes many things like locusts, or it will take on a new shape, and it'll still be the same old evil, but after a little time, it will grow again. We cannot ultimately destroy evil because it is in us. I don't mean to leave off on a black pill, but, that was Dinner for Few. So, anyway, I guess that'll do it for this particular session. A little sneak peek into next time, which is only in a couple seconds. I think I'm going to talk about Kingkiller Chronicle, or as some people know it, the Name of the Wind trilogy. Anyway, thanks for listening. Hope you guys are having a good time. I appreciate you sticking with me this far.